The Queensland Government is cracking down on homeschoolers. Let's have a look. Hi everyone, it's Rachel Heiser here and baby Abigail fast asleep, and today I'm talking because we're going to be covering something which is very much my day-to-day, and that is home educating my children. And the legislation that has just been brought to Parliament in the last week and a half, and what's going on basically, what does it mean for those of us who do homeschool, and what does it mean for the broader community? So let's jump in. I don't drink coffee. I have Florian's empty stein, but if you do, grab your stein of coffee and let's have a look. So basically what's going on is the Education Act is having its regular review. It hasn't been reviewed since 2006, and they're making lots of improvements on streamlining suspensions and disciplinary actions. They're helping the improvement of the rollout of free kindy, especially for e-kindy for isolated students. I don't know what that is. And the final part of the changes are for homeschooling in particular. So I'm not going to be talking about any of the P&C stuff or the suspensions or any of that side of it, because that doesn't really affect my day-to-day and I don't really know that much about it. So we'll just be talking about homeschooling today. So homeschooling is a very broad term used to describe lots of families that have their children at home between 9 and 3. And the first group is distance education. So that's what we started with. And that's basically you're enrolled in a school. The school looks after you. You pay your fees. It's just private school at home. Then you've got the home education unit. That's what we do. That's where you officially enroll with the education department, and you are a legal homeschooling student. And the final group are unregistered kids. So these kids are basically truant. I know a lot of them, and they're certainly not uneducated, but they're not in the system. So a lot of the kids that are unregistered are because they've changed schools a lot, or they've moved into state and they just didn't bother to register again, or maybe the older one or two kind of didn't go too well with school, and then they pulled them out to homeschool them, and then when the next one became registration age, they just didn't register them. So it's estimated that it could be as many as 20,000 students or more. It ranges from 50% to 80%, the estimates of how many homeschool kids aren't actually officially registered with the government. It's an unknown number, but I know it's a lot because I've got lots of friends and they're good value, and I can understand why. So that's who homeschoolers are. So the legislation really only affects the home education unit. It doesn't affect any kids in distance ed because they're in a school, and it doesn't affect anyone that's unregistered because no one knows they exist, basically. So why the change? So the change is because the number of kids being homeschooled has tripled since COVID in Queensland, but it was on the rise before COVID. So I think COVID just tipped people over the edge and gave them confidence to do something they were already planning on doing. The government has concerns over student safety because in the 2022-2023 report on child deaths in Queensland, there was one death of a child by suicide, and they were enrolled in the home education unit, and therefore all kids who are being homeschooled are at risk, apparently. And there are concerns over the quality of education, and I don't agree with that one either, so we'll get into it. So the proposed changes to homeschooling in Queensland is they're expanding the registration age from 17 to 18 to line up with the school system. I'm surprised I hadn't done that already. The next one is they're changing the definition of an approved education plan from providing a high-quality education, full stop, to giving that high-quality education a definition. And the definition is the Australian National Curriculum. or ACARA, and and then the senior syllabus, which my kids are in primary school, so I'm not really across that. But basically, lining up with ACARA as the only definition of a high-quality education. So there's no wiggle room with that. The next thing they've done is they added a requirement that home education should be provided in the best interest of the child. And they've removed the grace period from when you apply to be in the home education unit to when you need to submit your plan. And they want you to submit your plan with your application on that very day. And in Queensland, there's no allowance for dual enrolment. So the day you take your kid out of school is the same day you have to apply to homeschool. And if you're pulling your kid out for, say, bullying or mental health or some dangerous situation, and you as the parent go, this is not going to work, I'm pulling my kid out today, that means that you'll basically be recorded as absent every day it takes you to write your plan and submit, because you won't be sending your kids to school. And I think that puts a lot of undue pressure on families because it makes it easier for the bureaucrats to do what they need to do. So, next slide. So our journey. Basically, we sent our eldest to mainstream kindy, and then from there we decided that we didn't want to do the normal thing and send it to school, so we put her into distance education. And then in 2021, our second started going to school, and our eldest, well, I threatened, if you don't behave, I'll send you to school, and it got to a point where I had to follow through on my threats. So I don't threaten that anymore, because I sent her to school for one term in year 3, and that didn't work out for us. So she was back in distance education with her brother. And then in 2022, we changed to be fully homeschooled. So we got rid of the school entirely and just enrolled with the government. And so now I have 3 kids enrolled with HEU. Bye, Florian. So the first and probably the biggest change long term would be making sure that home education is provided in the best interest of the child. Because to me, this is removing free school choice. So they've singled out home education as the only form of education that requires this clause. So you don't have to justify why you would send your child to a private school as opposed to a public school, only why you would choose to homeschool. And who decides that it is in the best interest of the child? For us, we've got no reason not to send our kids to school. They don't have medical issues, they don't have mental health issues. It's a choice that we have made as parents because we feel this is the best for our family. So in a best case scenario, this clause may sit in the legislation and be there for the very rare occasion where they pull it out and go, your child is not being taken care of, and rather than sending it to child safety, we're going to force you to send your kid to school. That's probably the rarest application, but the opposite end of the spectrum could be that every single parent who homeschools their children now have to get a doctor or a psychologist or some expert to say that homeschooling is in the best interest of their child. That we don't know. We don't know. It's pure speculation because this is the legislation, and how that's implemented and what policies are drawn out of this legislation haven't been written yet. So a lot of families, myself included, are freaking out because it really should be the parents' choice of how they educate their children. And while homeschooling is a legal choice in Queensland, why is it suddenly come with caveats? In the parliamentary briefing on Monday to the committee who are reviewing this legislation. Now, remember, Queensland doesn't have an upper house, so if this gets through the lower house, it's done deal. And we have a majority Labor government. So this committee really is the last chance to make any impact. And the concluding statement in the briefing was homeschooling will always be in place for some children. Some children. So it's always going to be there for the children that fall through the cracks. They're always going to be there for the children with medical issues who have huge amounts of absenteeism unless they're home educated. It's always going to be for those extreme cases. It's always going to be for the kid that's constantly suspended. They can be homeschooled and still get an education. But what about for the kids where their parents choose to homeschool for no other reason than they believe it's the best choice? So that's why I have a problem with this clause being added. And it's also being added in the guiding principles. So it's right up the top of the legislation before the detail comes in. Once this is in place, it's not going to come out. Anyway. So when you are homeschooling, what is required now? So right now, we need to provide an annual plan at the beginning of the year of how we're going to provide high quality education. We need to show how we're going to cover the key learning areas from the Australian curriculum, however we choose, and basically how we're going to go about our day-to-day. Then 10 months later, so between 9 and 10 months, you get an email saying it's time for your report. So then we have to write an annual report examining what we have done. And in there we have to provide examples of the students' work. So this is our son's year 1 art. He's really getting into pixel art from all the computer games he plays. So at the beginning of the year, he was doing basic characters. To the end of the year, he was really drawing very complicated boss battles, as you can see by the second image. And that was what we provided as an example of 2 samples for art. So we have to provide 2 samples for English, 2 samples for maths, and 2 samples from another subject. If we are required to align with the Australian curriculum, I would have to provide samples for all 8 learning areas. And it's a case of what you do now in grade 2, then what you do in year 5, and what you do in year 1 may all be different in the Australian curriculum. Whereas when we're at home, we tend to learn as a family for those things. So the benefits of the current system are that it caters to different abilities to work. So on one end, you have the genius kids, and within a school setting, they can't go above 2 grade levels above where they're at. And so I do have friends with genius kids, like really smart kids, and they've had to go to the homeschooling route because there's no other way that they can challenge their children and keep upping the ante. And, you know, if you've got a kid who's in grade 5 but they're doing grade 11 maths, that isn't, the school system can't do that. And the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a lot of kids with neurodivergence or disability that fall into homeschooling because it's hard. So, and some of that's social, some of that's academic. At the moment, because a high quality education is not defined, it's very broad in how that can be applied. And so what that is, it may not necessarily be academic for a child with an intellectual disability. So I don't think this change will affect children with disabilities very much, simply because there is allowance within the national curriculum to scale the work up or scale it down, basically, if your child needs it. It's basically the kids that have an interest, they want to follow that interest. You can dedicate time to that interest and go, okay, you want to learn about Minecraft. All right, let's throw in some chemistry. Let's throw in some agriculture. Let's throw in some learning about different environments, because you're grabbing onto their interest and you're exploding that. And if you have to cover those different things in different year levels in the curriculum, or it's just going to make it much less flexible. Also, homeschooling is completely self-funded. Like, there's no magical bank account that homeschooling parents get to tap into. The $20,000 that goes to every school student doesn't go to homeschool families. We're self-funded. And parents who are critical of the national curriculum and want to take on educating their own children and not delegate that to someone else, well, why not let them self-fund that? You can't have your cake and eat it too. So the national curriculum is really, it's designed for a classroom. It's designed for one teacher teaching 25, 30 kids, not 4 kids sitting around a dining room at different ages and stages. There's so much busy work. So basically, this legislation is targeting the families who are conscientious and have decided to officially enrol their kids. It's not actually going to do anything for truancy. It's not going to do anything for basically making life easier for the department to go through our reports, because they're going to be a lot bigger and longer, and it's really not going to improve anyone's lives. It's just making more paperwork. It's just increasing the bureaucracy that goes with this. And we already have quite a lot. We have more than other states. Other states don't have to align with the CARA. They do need to report on the 8 subject areas, but this is going above and beyond the rest of the country. So we don't home educate because it's easier. If my kids are at school, I could be out earning an income. We could be a 2-income family, not just a Florian income family. So we're doing this because we love our kids, and we want the best for them. We want to give them opportunities. So this is our eldest. She ran her own business last year. She got the sewing machine out and made book covers and pencil rolls and sold them at the market. So she's got plenty of stock if anyone would like any. And she made kits so kids could sew them at home themselves. And that was a really good opportunity that I don't think she would have the time to do if she was all day at school. So what can you do if you're like me, you don't agree with this proposal? So the committee reviewing this is taking submissions until 12 noon on Monday. I know it's not much time, but please submit. You don't have to be in Queensland. You can be anywhere, and you don't have to be 18. So I will probably encourage my children to write something. You just need to make sure that they understand what they're writing and it is their opinion. So I don't know. I won't be getting my younger ones. Probably my 11-year-old will be the only one who would basically be capable of writing a submission. And there's also a free to homeschool hashtag going around. So if you want to hear personal stories from the homeschooling community, just search for that hashtag, and you'll hear plenty of mums having a rant and a rage, and it'll give you an interesting insight into what our lives look like. So that's it for me now, and you probably won't see me for a while because I'm looking after babies. And I guess I press the button and that'll be it. Thank you. Bye.
Queensland is cracking down on homeschools, and Rachel can't record an intro. We press that button.
It's probably perfect.
It's done.
It's probably perfect.